You both talked about the importance of trust. Now it's easier to be friends, if times are good. Right now the economic times are pretty challenging. What's your experience? Do companies kind of retract from cluster engagement, or is this actually an element of stability that they still work together, maybe also because government is involved?
In Czech Republic, we can see a growing interest in being a developed cluster organization and also be able to use the structural funds from the operation program. It gives the clusters a larger dimension. They can provide with necessary facilities like laboratories or testing labs or whatever with a larger money than each company could do itself. And they are aware of this advantage, of course, because it helps all of them to go forward and grow.
We talked about evaluation before. Have you evaluated whether you get some innovation out of these programs? You get new technical facility, you get new products or services that actually develop out of this, or you?
Yes, but this is not the approach completed by the government. It is still ahead of us to bring in a good assessment system. But I can show the example of Hungary, where they have the pole program, which is really well elaborated and showing who is the starting cluster, how it can be supported, where they have then the accredited clusters. It means they have to complete certain criteria of cluster management, of research and development, of product development, and so on. And this is a model, I think, that would suit to our Eastern European countries.
Okay.
Örjan talked at the beginning about the new role of cluster policy, if you will, that it draws on innovation policy, regional policy, a lot of other policies. In your experience in both of your countries, do you see that cluster policy has been able to play this role as an integrator, or has it been more, another silo, just alongside these existing policy areas?
I must say that the policies in individual countries in Eastern Europe differ a lot. Somewhere we have, as I mentioned, Hungarian pole program policy for clusters. But for example, in Slovakia there is no such a policy at all. So they are now preparing something. We have been working with clusters through its special operation program title subsidy. This is quite important. Quite a lot of money has been drawn. 20 clusters asked in the last call, and this makes tens of millions of euros. Perhaps hundreds. I'm not good in zeros. It is still the task for the countries to make the cluster policies more visible and more integrated with innovation policies, regional development policies, and the industry policies, let's say.
I would add, in the case of us country, that we are a real small territory and very densely populated. For us, cluster organizations are really pivotal agents in the system, and cluster policy is viewed as only a tool, an important tool, but a tool within the whole system of innovation and regional competitiveness development. So it's an important tool, but a tool. And it's very important not to see clusters as the whole thing, but only as a part, important part, and with a possibility of pivoting or being important agents inside the system, in this sense. And regarding bad or good times that Christian talked before, in Basque Country we suffered a really hard times 20 years ago, and was one of the reasons why this cluster policy was initiated. And bad times, sometimes, if you only have two possibilities, or survive or die. If you have survived, you haven't dead. So sometimes it's good to have hard times. Okay. Now when we are suffering hard times, probably we have, with clusters in our lives, we are going to survive a little better.
Okay.
I'm sure.
So we have talked about how regional policy can interact a lot with cluster policy. Let us turn back a little bit to the level of the European Union again for Europe here. What are your experiences? I know, for example, you, Juan Manuel, you are part of the European Cluster Policy Group. What is going on right now when it comes to the European Union?
Yeah, really, we are trying to advise European Commission regarding with such heterogeneous policies, different starting points, different views. It's really difficult to get to some commonalities. In any case, we are trying, along with Christian, by the way, we are trying to advise, to put some ideas in common in order to make cluster policies in Europe be as fine as possible. We are also collaborating with the European Excellence Program for cluster managers, of course with Cluster Observatory. So we are trying to be an integrated system of helping Brussels for all these things. In the case of the European Cluster Policy Group, in the more abstract level, I would say, but then the concretion comes with Observatory, with Excellence, and with European Cluster Alliance. So it's, we're trying to get along with all this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add on what Juanma said, I think the key element is that in Europe we have realized that we really have a disadvantage compared to places like the United States that have had a more integrated market for a long time and have developed stronger clusters. We are not making the right use of our assets that we have, our universities, our very strong companies that are competing globally, and we need to find new ways to do that. We need a new growth paradigm, if you will. And that, I think, is driving a little bit the interest in the European Commission to think about how can clusters be used in this context. Now, the Commission, interestingly, is not thinking about clusters as something where they are the central actor. So not like the structural funds that we heard about, we are going to hand out a lot of money and we are going to then do this. The spirit is much more, how can we orchestrate and help the member countries and the member regions to do a better job in the cluster policies that they used. At the beginning of this program, we talked about how this is only 20 years old. So this is really not a very established policy. I think the challenge now is, and the challenge that the European Commission has taken on with a number of projects, is how do we provide better tools? So there's a lot of talk about educating cluster managers better. Better data, that's why the European Cluster Observatory is so important. And kind of a better general understanding and framework for member countries to do that. And so that's the different roles that the European Commission tries to play through several programs that we have. Now, this battle is going to be won not in Brussels. It's going to be won within the region and within the individual clusters. But I do think Europe can help, and they can help all of us to do a better job in the clusters that we work in.
So thank you very much. So today we have been discussing cluster policy. And we've had our expert here, Dr. Christian Ketels, and a few experts from around Europe. To all of you, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we can conclude that, first of all, cluster policy is here. It's used a lot around Europe at the level of regions and nations and also across Europe. I think it's used for many purposes. Sometimes it's used for regional policy. Sometimes it's about innovation policy. Sometimes it's about industry and entrepreneurship policy. So as Christian said, this is a tool that can be used across a number of policy areas. But in a sense, you could say that maybe it's not just a new policy. Maybe it's a new tool of reformulating more traditional policies. So with that, thank you for viewing this program, and goodbye.